Hello all, welcome to day 26 of our Red Letter Challenge, our 40-day challenge with Zach Zender. Today, we're going to talk about how we let our light shine. Now, this is a really simple illustration, but it helps us to understand something more fully about who God is and what He calls us to be as believers in Christ. See, wherever light goes, it's evident that it's there, especially in the midst of darkness. And so in a spiritual sense, we're walking around in a world that is dark, and by nature of calling ourselves Christians, we are equating ourselves with the light. And so therefore, we must understand that this will be very evident. And it'll be evident if we do what we say we're supposed to. It'll also be evident if we don't do what we say we're about. And either way, it reflects on the light that is Jesus. Now, I want to move a little bit with our analogy here. I'm going to keep this around, but I want us to focus on this for a minute. This here is a salt shaker. And salt is a mineral, right? And it's a spice that we use in our food to enhance the flavor of what's already there. And if something feels a little bit flat flavor-wise, you throw salt on it, it gets better because it draws out the good tastes that are within something, and we pay better attention to it. Jesus calls us the salt of the earth, and He talks about it in a way that allows us to know that it can lose its saltiness, right? So when Jesus was walking about on the earth, there wasn't salt made in a laboratory like there is today. Salt was a commodity that was very expensive because it took a lot of labor to produce it. They would have to flood entire fields with seawater and then wait for the water to drain away, or send the water drain it away, and make it very shallow so the water would evaporate, and what would be left was the salt. And then they would take that salt and skim it off of the dirt and then preserve it and then use it to sell to people to use as spice. When He talks about the salt losing its saltiness, that was realistic for them in a way that it's not for us. See, our salt is created in a laboratory, and so that means nothing impure is ever touching that salt. But when you get salt by letting salt land on dirt and letting the water evaporate away, and then scraping the salt off of the dirt, there's dirt with your salt. So it's not as pure. And once it has that reality of that contamination around it, it's good for a little while, but over time it loses its flavoring capability because it's got this other contaminant along with it that changes it over time. Jesus is telling us to be salt that doesn't lose its saltiness. So how do we do that? Well, it's based on how we point toward Jesus. In the illustration for day 26, Zach talks about the fact that if he preaches a message, but he doesn't ever point to Jesus in the message as the reason or the salvation message of Jesus or those kind of things, then he comes to a place where they might walk away and say, oh, that pastor was really smart, or that pastor was really funny. But if that's the whole sum of the sum total of what they get from his message, then they haven't really learned what's most important. We, as bearers of Christ's light, we ought to be salty. It ought to be noticeable when we're there. When I was younger, we had a salt container in our house. My mother-in-law came for a visit. Now, we all knew it was salt, but we didn't label it in any way. And she made a dessert for us. She took the amount of sugar she was supposed to use and used salt instead. And when we made this dessert, and I bit into this, I knew it was going to taste great, so I did not hesitate, took a big old spoonful, put it right in my mouth, and realized it didn't taste like it was supposed to taste at all. Ugh. Spit that out right away and recognized that the salt was very noticeable. In a similar way, we ought to be salty. We ought to be noticeable as believers in Christ, as light bearers. And so today I want you to consider all of the things that you have done and take them as a grab bag of possibilities and consider which of those ought you to do again. And go and pursue that. And I pray that as you do, you will remember who you are and whose you are, and that it blesses you.